The media does its job and explains to the public how bad the Pritzker's first session was for our long-term health as a state. If the media does its job, hopefully a couple things happen in 2020. One, we turn back some of the Democrats who voted for this excessive spending and medical marijuana and abortion on demand through all 9 months paid for by taxpayers. We have to turn those people out of office, and we have to defeat the income tax increase that they are planning on making a constitutional amendment.
Well, there you are. Jeannie Ives, former candidate in the Republican primary for governor, is asking the question, who speaks for the Illinois Republican Party? When the Democrats and Pritzker outline these massive changes they're talking about, who stands up? When they want to talk about massively expanding abortion, who speaks out? She seems to be saying nobody.
Well, and Jeff, I was going to say, I had an opportunity to speak with Jeannie just the other day, and she's been out of office now for 6 months, but a lot of people are saying privately that, you know, now that the Republicans don't have a governor, they have no statewide office holder, they're wondering who speaks for the party. And after this momentous spring session, and you and I have covered, and everyone has called historic, some of the Republicans are saying that, you know, the party faithful are saying maybe there wasn't enough of a fight put together by some of those who ostensibly are the leaders, primarily Jim Durkin in the House and Senator Brady in the Senate.
Yeah, let's take a look, because, you know, Bill Brady, the Senate Republican leader, spoke earlier this week at the City Club, and it sounded like he was giving a defense for the way the Republicans played it.
There were people in our own party and in this state who thought that Leader Durkin and myself and the caucuses that we proudly represent should have taken a fire and brimstone approach. That maybe we should have just said, "Oh, hell with you, Democrats! We're going to fight everything, and we're not going to cooperate or try to work." But Leader Durkin and I felt it was important that we visit with our caucuses and we talk about what opportunities we would be missing if we took that approach. And we decided that there were two, to use Governor Pritzker's term, too many big issues facing this state that we had to at least try to work in a bipartisan fashion on areas we could agree. But we did find common ground. Investing in our children's education, the Invest in Kids scholarship program. One of the things that we fought hard for under Governor Rauner was an investment in low-income children having the same opportunity as others in private schools. We found common ground in investing in senior care. Our nursing homes and our supportive living facilities were hurting badly because we had underfunded them in the past. And we knew that we needed reform in business areas, and we fought hard for that.
Look, Terry and viewers, a school scholarship program is an important thing. Republicans believe in school choice, and that was a small program. It was a victory a while ago. Keeping that, making it all about that? I mean, massive change in abortion, basically saying, some Republicans would say, Joe Morris, who I spoke to, leading voice as a conservative Republican, said basically you've made partial birth abortions okay. Even though the Democrats said this didn't change the law, it just sort of codified the case law. He would say, no, this is quite different. And other Republicans would say that. And Jeannie Ives would say that. And Bill Brady mentioned abortion, but just barely 25-minute talk at the City Club. You know, recreational marijuana, we should just have it, not really debate it. I mean, maybe they debated it for 3 hours, but how much did the Republicans really say about that? The leaders, Durkin, Brady. So is Jeannie Ives the leader?
Well, I think it's, I don't know that people would necessarily say Jeannie Ives is the leader, but maybe it begs the question, are those who are in leadership, primarily the legislative leaders at this point, they're the highest ranking Republicans in the state, are they being strong enough in their opposition to Governor Pritzker? And as Bill Brady said in his speech, some were counseling that they should have fire and brimstone. They said that they wanted to have more of a get along kind of an approach here because they wanted to get certain things done, like the Capitol bill. But there is, I think, from what I hear, a growing divide just among the partisans, both within the House. You have, as Jeff, you've mentioned yourself last week's show, this group of conservative House Republicans, and Jeannie Ives, while out of the House, is kind of in that same group of those who say that the Republicans ought to be putting up a stronger fight and giving more, being more articulate in their defense. When I spoke with her yesterday, she mentioned as an example one issue, the abortion, which was changed. Now they can do abortions through the third trimester. But let's listen as one example of what she was saying, where maybe the Republicans in the legislature were falling short in their opposition.
Celebratory nature over the destruction of human life is outrageous. And here's the other thing. Our side that's pro-life, look, we weren't filing legislation to do a heartbeat bill. Seen in a number of other states. We weren't filing legislation that says that all of these abortion clinics had to be inspected on a regular basis. We weren't filing legislation that gave them higher standards for practice at all. And they didn't have to do this. We already are the abortion capital of the Midwest. This just makes it more definitive that way. We weren't doing hardly anything to move it to our side of the aisle. We were just basically trying to hold the status quo.
Look, some Republicans would say basically Brady and Durkin are lying down. Okay, I mean, Brady's whole thing was, look, this battle we're all gearing for is the progressive income tax. You know, it's going to be on the ballot. We want to make sure people say no to that. But you know, it's like he didn't really care much about the operating budget. That was $40 billion, up of like almost $1.5 billion in supposedly tough times. You know, many Republicans and other independents like Sheila Weinberg talked about that budget being imbalanced. Brady wasn't talking about that. I mean, you know, in the House, Durkin, they put 9 or 10 Republicans on approving that House budget with many big tax revenue increases. How much can the Republican Party oppose that? So it's not just abortion, that's an issue, but it's the economic issues. The capital fund, Terry, as you know, our viewers will see if they go watch your interview with Jeannie Ives, she pointed out what the last capital budget was, I think, $31 billion. This is 45. That's a 50% increase. In a state in which the roads may need work, do they need 50% more than the last time?
Well,
maybe
and
they kept it just at 31 billion.
The other thing,
not 35.
the other thing I would say is when last time they passed the capital bill, they did not increase the gas tax. Here they've doubled it. And as Bill Fleischle with the Illinois Petroleum Marketers recently said to me, they did these programs where they went around the state talking about the capital bill, but they never heard any testimony from the Department of Transportation as far as what, you know, the head of the Department of Transportation. And Jeannie Ives mentioned in our interview, you can watch the full interview on the Illinois Channel YouTube site, but she mentioned that, you know, there's a lot of pork in there. They got $1 million for the HIV, marking those who have died with HIV. And she goes, when this state is as broke as it is, why are we spending $1 million or $1.5 million on some little park things like that, these memorials? Let's put all that money, if it's really to be rebuilding our infrastructure, then let's be putting it into infrastructure.
And it's not that, look, $1 million is important, $50 million for the Arts Council, for Shirley Madigan, Speaker Madigan's wife. It's the $45 billion. And so people have to say, okay, there's a road project and maybe we're spending $4 billion or $5 billion on that. How confident are you is that it's being spent efficiently, that it's going to the lowest bidder, that that project that's costing the state $4 billion maybe is costing $1 billion more than it should? Because we don't even, they tell us we don't even have a list of the projects here. So did the legislators even know what they were approving when they approved $45 billion? I mean, and who will be monitoring that? Who will be making sure it's efficient? What if they cut it down to a more manageable size, maybe like 30 billion? Wouldn't that allow them maybe to cut that gas tax increase from going from 19 cents to 38 cents a gallon, maybe going up 4 or 5 cents, maybe 9 cents? The Republicans would have something to run on. And it's more than just being partisan. They could say, in these tough times, we cut back on that gas tax increase. We still allowed the roads to be fixed, but at a more gradual pace. And people can live with a smaller increase in gas tax. They can't do that at all, Terry.
Well,
because guess what?
You know,
they put 20 people on. Excuse me. They put 20. The Republicans in the State House put 20 Republicans as a yes vote on the Capitol bill. Can they really run against the gas tax increase? I don't think so.
Well, that's a good part, and that is what I was going to be saying. As we tape this, it's the first day of summer. The summer driving season starts, and on July 1, our gas prices are going to jump by at least 19 cents, and actually a bit more, because we then put a sales tax on top of the motor fuel tax. And when the motor fuel tax goes from 19 cents a gallon to 38 cents a gallon, you're going to have that jump. And you know, we'll have to see. Talk about a regressive tax. That's very regressive on those middle income or lower income families. Forget about vacation, just driving to work. That's going to add probably at least in the area of $200 to $300 a year, depending upon how far you drive, to the amount of money you're spending a year on gasoline.
So I think what Jeannie Ives is saying, you have to draw issue contrast. You have to say, what are the important issues? It's not just one or two. There are a whole slew of issues. And if you're House Republican Leader Jim Durkin, you better be talking out about this. You don't have to be fire and brimstone. You can work collaboratively with the Democrats where it's warranted. But you can't just lie down and throw 20 votes. That's almost half your caucus on a major expansion that probably wasn't warranted to that level.
Jim Durkin would say
that's what Republicans are saying.
And I believe we may have played a bite of this. Jim Durkin would say, he said on the House floor that yes, they put those votes on the Capitol bill, but that's why they also got some reforms that were much needed on business issues. And not to say those weren't. One of the things they did, they got rid of that fee that was put on truckers back when Rod Blagojevich initially started by adding $1,000 per truck, and then it was later reduced to $400. Well, that's gone now. Although the truckers would say they closed the door too late. We had something like any number of many of the trucking firms moved out of state to avoid that tax. But Jim Durkin could say that, but then the issue, I think that, as we've mentioned, with people like Jeannie Ives would say, and some of the conservatives, where were we on these social issues, and why were we not maybe fighting harder? And I would just say this, we're not picking sides, but just as I interviewed Jeannie Ives, she was going out to talk to one of the Republican groups right after our interview, and she's been saying last week she was in talking to another Republican group. So Republicans are still inviting her to talk, and it does beg the question going forward, who will speak for the Republican Party and who can articulate so that the Republican base is energized for 2020. I'll leave that as an open question, but I think that's a question.
But additionally, there's sniping going on, as you know, somewhat quietly on Senate Republican Leader Bill Brady, because people are questioning his connection with the gaming industry and the benefits he's been achieving as a result of his business relationship with Midwest Electronics Gaming, which places these gambling
in bars and stuff.
Video gaming machines. Yeah. Sorry, that was the word I was looking. He places them at establishments, and each time he places one, from what he's saying, he makes money. But he doesn't want to tell us about the amount of money he's making, because I and others in the media were at a press conference after he spoke at the City Club, and we started asking him questions about that, and his staffer cut that off after about 4 minutes. And and he says, look, I don't tell you about how much money I was making.
Well, Jeff, we got a bite from WTTW, we borrowed, so let's take a listen to what the senator said during that press conference that you were in attendance.
I'm a business person. I've been in various businesses, and from my real estate companies to home building business, other businesses, like all other members of the General Assembly. This just is another business interest I have that deals in the area of video poker.
Yeah, so, it's not the same, Terry. As you know, gaming is a very regulated business, not just by the gaming board, but it's regulated by the state. There's statutes. There are things that say what they can do and can't. As you know, earlier in the session, we were talking about a projected very large tax increase on these video gaming stations, and it turns out the tax was much less. Bill may recuse himself from that particular vote, but as the Senate Republican leader, he presumably has some influence with other Republicans on how they will vote. And so, when Amanda Vinicky from WTTW asked Bill, is this appropriate? And, is it illegal? If it's not illegal, is it unethical? I mean, he should be talking about that kind of thing because the Republicans have viewed themselves over the years as different from Democrats. Democrats are often viewed as heavily involved in government, possible conflicts of interest, because their career ends up being things where they make money in a way that's related to what they're doing politically. Bill Brady was not doing that when he was making money in the real estate business. I don't think a lot of what he was voting on and what he was dealing with politically affected that. Now it does. It's a legitimate issue, is what some Republicans are saying, and Bill needs to talk about it. And he may be right, but you can't run from the media and say, okay, 4 minutes and we're done. And that's what he did.
I'll just say before we close this out, I think we are approaching a part within the Republican Party. We're post-Rauner. Now, Governor Rauner had all the money and could fund these races. Now he's gone, his money's gone. The Democrats, interestingly, are in the position with they've got Governor Pritzker with all his money to fund them. The Republicans have to put back together the infrastructure of their party. They need to get more candidates recruited to run. They need to raise money, and someone's going to have to decide. And to me, it's somewhat analogous to what we have seen at the federal level, where Donald Trump, a lot of the established Republicans didn't want Donald Trump, but now he's the leader of the party, and they have their own internal fight at the federal level. I think we may well be seeing some of this developing. We'll have to see how it shakes out. But that said, we'll keep an eye on it. We'll keep bringing more information as it warrants. But Jeff, there's other issues we're going to be talking about. One of them is, speaking of Governor Rauner, he for years was at a tug of war with AFSCME and never was able to get together a contract. Now it looks like something may be moving on that score.
Yeah, and we're finding out why. There's one reason why some think it didn't move is because AFSCME was in a holding pattern. AFSCME didn't want to strike a deal with Rauner because he wasn't giving on many things. And therefore, I think some thought maybe that AFSCME was playing it in hopes that Rauner would soon be gone and they could deal with a friendlier negotiator like a Democrat like J.B. Pritzker. And so the offer of the government of the Pritzker administration, who took over these negotiations now with AFSCME, that offer was leaked to Mark Maxwell at WCIA. Wirepoint's got access to that. Wirepoint is a curator and aggregator of articles and original content dealing with, as they put it, connecting the points between the government and the economy and people. They've done a pretty extensive analysis of that. And, the average state employee, Terry, under this offer, which presumably will be accepted and ratified by the AFSCME union, they were already the second highest in the country. Salary of $59,700, second only to New Jersey. That's the average. A lot of them obviously are making much more. And that's going to go up in 3 years under this contract if ratified to almost $67,000, 12% boost. They get a long-term contract, guaranteed pay increases. They get a guaranteed long-term pension that'll be worth $1.8 million. They get 75% of their health care is subsidized while they're an employee, okay? And then if they're an employee for 20 years, what do they get? Only get 20 years or more. 20 years gets them free health care once they're retired. Terry, do you know how many people who are paying those funds, how many of the taxpayers have that kind of a contract? I mean, I don't think there are many who have a long-term contract with a guaranteed pension, and 95% of them have Social Security as well. So they get both Social Security and their own pension. I mean, this, as pointed out by WirePoints, 2005 to 2015, the average state employee salary went up 40%. 40%. The Illinois taxpayer's salary average went up 11%, consumer price index 5%. So if people want to know why we have a $200 billion hole in our pensions, and they want to say it's because the taxpayers aren't paying enough, maybe we've been too generous. And now the spotlight is on Governor J.B. Pritzker. We're balanced. We're not saying we're balanced, but now shouldn't the spotlight be for J.B. Pritzker to be holding, and not just a press conference? We've tried to have him on. I've tried to have him on. I'm still working. Hopefully we will. He needs to sit down with somebody who's going to be challenging and tough and knowledgeable and explain the ZASME contract. And I don't know that he has to wait until it's approved. In fact, maybe he should do it before it is. Now that the cat's out of the bag, now they can't say, well, I don't want to talk about it because it's not approved. We know what the offer is. Maybe it's not too late to modify it and draw back some of those terms if he were to become convinced maybe this is too generous.
I don't know how this all fits, and maybe it doesn't fit at all, but of course everyone knows the state pensions are one of the leading reasons, and the governor talked about this at the end of the legislative session. One of the leading reasons why the economy, the budget has grown over the years, because you have to keep ratcheting up the pension payment. And as you mentioned, our interview with Sheila Weinberg of last week said that, even with the pension price going up that we're paying, we're still underpaying what we need to pay in order to keep current by about $5 billion underpayment. We're paying roughly $8.5 billion, and we should be more like $13 billion. So,
I mean, you raise a good point.
One wonders if you could be negotiating some of this ASME contract and trying to get some kind of a deal and use that as leverage, with some kind of concessions.
It's getting worse, not better, because they came up also with a stipend for every state employee of $2,500 to compensate them for the economic hardship of the Rauner days. I mean, I know that they've been pushing for back pay, which they weren't getting increases, and I don't know the resolution of that. That was in the courts. If they did get the back pay, and they still get a $2,500 stipend for economic hardship, what was the hardship? And will that stipend be pensionable? Will that jack up their pensions in the future, even as we now passed a law that allows spiking of, requires the state to pay for spiking of school teacher salaries, which we were doing before we stopped and we started again. The point is, Terry, why isn't Senator Brady talking about this? Why isn't, Republican House Leader Durkin talking about this? I got this contract. Everybody's got it. I mean, most people have access to the internet. Why didn't Brady talk about that in the city club?
Well, that might fit into what we were, as you were just saying, it's a city club. That might fit into what we were just talking about, and that you have some of those who are on the more of the conservative wing of the Republican Party saying, guys, what are you doing? Where are you representing the interest of the Republican Party faithful as far as trying to keep government smaller and regulations down? And we'll have to see to what extent that these issues blow up or don't blow up going forward in the power structure of the Republican Party.
Yeah, well, the maternity leave, paid maternity leave for each state employee goes under this contract from 4 weeks to 10 weeks. If both employees are with the state, if both parents are with the state, you don't get 4 to 10 weeks. Each gets 10 weeks, and you can stack that. Take them 10 weeks, both parents taking off, paid, or they can go sequentially. Is anybody, or in the private sector, do you think you can get 10 weeks paid maternity leave? I don't know. I don't think so.
Jeff, we don't often do a whole lot of individual coverage of municipal government, but Chicago is not your average community. And one of the things that I think it's interesting to say now that we have Lori Lightfoot as the mayor of Chicago and what changes are going on. And recently there was another example of the FBI raiding an alderman's office up in Chicago, and I don't know what you can tell us about that.
Well, they don't know because the FBI is pretty quiet. You know, when some of the people saw the FBI going into this word office from Alderman Kerry Austin, who had head of the budget committee under the prior mayor and was kind of dumped by this mayor, but she happened to be actually in an event speaking with the mayor at the same time her office was being raided by the FBI. And when people wandered up and said, "What are you folks doing?" they said, "You know, we're fixing a leaky pipe or something." So the FBI doesn't talk a lot about it, but some are speculating that, you know, there were some issues about ghost payrolling with her son being on the payroll as superintendent. Maybe he wasn't, I think he's gone now, but maybe he wasn't really working. Ghost payrolling is a big tradition in Chicago. People go on the payroll, but you just don't see them because they don't appear at work. They just appear to get money. Well, we don't know. It's all number one, not even allegations at this point, just rumor and innuendo. You know, the FBI took away boxes and boxes and computers of material. They'll go through it. If they think they have something, they'll file an information or an indictment, and then we'll learn more. If they don't, they won't. So we'll let that one go for now until we know more. But one thing we know more about is the indictment of Ed Burke, because that came down a few weeks ago. The criminal information have now been extended to an indictment, supersedes what was said before, and it's much broader. Before they were talking about shakedowns of some business executives at Burger King who were trying to get a renovation for one of the franchise restaurants at Burger King. And what Burke was doing there, or alleged to be doing, was basically using his power over getting permits and so forth released, and sort of the aldermanic privilege on that score to hold these things up in exchange for getting them, allegedly, Burger King representatives to use his firm for law firm business. Well, now, so now in short, now what are they doing? Now it comes out in the indictment. There was a major development of the old post office in Chicago that straddles the Eisenhower 433 West Van Buren. And what was Burke doing there? He was trying to squeeze these folks, basically, again, a shakedown.
Allegedly,
allegedly, for $100 million tax increment financing subsidy. You know, if they want that, as far as I'm concerned, he said, this is from the tape or the wire, they can go F themselves. Alderman Burke, 75, referring to the development of that office. Because why? They wouldn't give him the legal business. And so he was going to block, allegedly, tax increment financing. It ties in even with the things like admission fees for the Field Museum. There are allegations that he wanted a friend to get his daughter a job or an internship, and if they weren't going to do that, he was going to see what he could do with the park board to get them not to approve the fee increase for the Field Museum. So it just goes on and on, these allegations of corruption. And, you know, the mayor this time, though, the mayor, Lori Lightfoot, said, you know, she was a former prosecutor. What'd she say? She says, as a former prosecutor, sounds like a pretty strong case to me. She thinks Ed Burke ought to step down and resign right now. Tony,
Jeff, we're going to have to, sadly, close it out. I know you and I love talking about this, but we're running a little bit heavy. So, folks, thank you again for watching. Don't forget you can follow us on our Illinois Channel website. If you miss an episode, want to go back. If you want to look at any of the interviews where we take some of these bites, the speech by Bill Brady and the interview with Jeannie Ives. We thank you for watching. Jeff, we'll see you next week.
Thanks.